Hey guys, I want to just welcome you to Inspire. Today it's going to be a little bit different. I know normally when you're at the setup, it's for an interview, but I have someone that's very near and dear to me. Her name is Cheritha Reed. She's my goddaughter, but she also works with me and has worked with me on various projects. And so I asked her if we could take some time out and just sit down and kind of talk about what's going on, today, with Black Lives Matter, the George Floyd, incident, with the rioting, just how it's affecting our lives. So I want you to just give us the liberty to just have just a conversation here in front of you. And hopefully if you have anything that you'd like to say, that when you see this posted on Instagram, you'll DM me some questions and I'll get back to you on a later date. And maybe even we can open it up and we can discuss some things. All right. So Cheritha, how has all of this really how has it impact you?
I think the most challenging part so far has been, interestingly enough, the conversations that we've been having with our kids. It stirred up some questions. Why? How do we handle it? How do we respond? Right. What do we do from here? What does this mean? So probably the most impact has been trying to figure out that conversation. What does that response look like when you're talking to your children as a Black mother, having, Black kids? Right. How do you have that conversation? That's probably the most challenging impact right now that I can experience firsthand.
And especially since we have never had to have those conversations. I was telling you earlier, it's like I spent most of my time throwing water on the fire to make sure that we didn't have to have those conversations, even if we saw something pop up and we knew that it was a little kind of off right there. And I think my reason for that was because, one, I didn't want their hearts to become contaminated and start operating out of bitterness and judgment. And then I didn't want my own, because that's one thing that I know. Once we turn that dial and you are over into bitterness and anger and you just kind of let the winds of this kind of carry you, it's hard to dial it back.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
It's hard to dial it back.
Yeah.
When I was talking to my husband, I think what makes it a little bit more unique is that some of you probably know, but there might be quite a few that do not know, but I have a not culture, because we're all the same culture, ethnic background family, from Hispanic to part Korean to Anglo, and actually my husband is white. And then to put the seal on the deal, he's a white cop married to a Black woman, or we can just say I'm a Black woman married to a white cop. So it kind of just a police officer, and so it just kind of threw a whole nother spin on it. And at first, I'm gonna tell you the truth, I didn't know how to function. All of that, watching that tape with George Floyd, it pulled on some emotions I didn't even know were inside of me. It really tapped into something, because you're quite a bit younger than I am, and so I remember there are some things that I remember, but where it was really publicized and we saw things kind of just really break out like this for me, where it impacted me the way this has, it was back with Rodney King. I don't know if these things were actually said, but of course the media was playing it up, and it was saying the police officers were calling him a monkey, or things like that. And I just remember when I heard those things, whether they were true or false, I just remember how I just wept. I cried, and as I watched that and how they beat him and so on and so forth. And of course, being married to a police officer, he's explaining to you all of the dynamics of, whatever. But inside of me, it really challenged my worth here in the United States. And so when this happened, and I'm looking at that, the first thing that I felt, well, actually, I didn't even know I was feeling some kind of way. But I posted this on Facebook. I was going to my closet, and when I went in there and I leaned over and a tear rolled down my face, and I felt something running on my face, and so I wiped it, and when I wiped it and realized it was a tear, it was like a flood.
Wow.
And in that moment, I tried to sit in my closet and tape how I was feeling at that moment, talk it out, for everybody to see. But it was so ugly I couldn't, because what it did was it did another whip around on me in my emotions of like, really, how do you see, and how do you see me, but not how you see me, Regina, but how do you see black people here in America? How do you really see us? You know, because how I thought you saw us, or how you thought, and I'm in that, how I thought you saw me. I could feel it. It was like it was shifting. Like, Lord, have you, like, what do you think of me?
I wonder if because we've not ignored it, just learned how to function instead of it, in the midst of it. You know, if it created that blinder, like, okay, maybe this isn't as bad as it was. You know, maybe the race issue is not a factor like how it used to be. And so then when you have situations like George Floyd, you know, for me, it kind of, I still haven't watched the video. No, I still haven't watched it.
Why?
I think after my husband's response to it, and then you and I discussed your response to it,
You didn't want to
I
have
wasn't
that.
ready.
What kind of response were you not ready to have? You didn't want to feel it, or you were afraid of how you might respond after it? I mean, like, I think it just caught me off guard, because I knew, watching him in those moments when he went still, and then I realized that he died. I knew then he really had died then. And I had watched someone needlessly die with you know, this backwash of, was it like, did you just murder this man? You know, and was it because he was black, or what was going on here? And I think it was just the posture of the police officer. You know, he had his hands in his pocket, and I mean, it was a very cruel moment. And even to look in his eyes, and he looked, to me, I'm just saying this because I'm in the spirit world. That's like what E. Roger Mitchell said. He said, "I'm not in the whatever. I'm operating the spirit realm," and so from a spiritual perspective, it looked demonic.
I think I didn't want to feel it, the sadness of it. I didn't want to experience the emotions that it may bring, and I did not want an opportunity to be created to make me feel any different
than how you feel.
Than how I feel
able
already.
To be able to have balance and love towards all people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I've, you know, because I watch the news, I've seen clips or little portions of it. You know, so maybe like 15 seconds, but I haven't watched the whole thing, and so I've seen that, and I didn't want to have to be challenged with that emotion or even that thought. Another thing it did was it sort of tried to create this fear of wonder what would happen if I get pulled over.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That wasn't there before.
Really?
Yeah, I've never been concerned about getting pulled over. If I'm speeding, you know, and I pass the police and he pulls me over, I never had that fear before, although I knew, you know. And so since this, we passed the police maybe last week, and I felt that. And so if I felt that, I had the anxiety. So if I felt that and I haven't watched the video,
how would you feel afterwards?
How would I feel afterwards? And I didn't want to, wasn't ready for that.
I saw that, but not this time, but I saw that with what was happening like in Louisiana, and then with the things that were happening in Dallas. What was that, about maybe 4 years ago?
I think so.
Something
about 3
like
years
that.
ago, yeah.
It was a minute. But with that, I remember talking with one of my aunts, my father's sister, and I remember her having this, she had to drive over to, we were at the church, so she drive over to the church. She was picking up her grandkids, and I remember us having that conversation, and she like took off her, she put on her earrings, and she was trying to drive slow, and because she was so afraid she'd get pulled over. But with her, what was happening was, I'm almost, I'm older. and she's older than me. So our experiences were like, you know, the same but different. So she saw some things, experienced some things that made her feel like, you know, this is happening again. And I think too, I think with me, that's the thing that I think I'm most, that I was most afraid of, was that I don't want to do this again. I mean, I didn't do it, but I don't want to do what I saw. I don't want to see it. And I know there are people probably saying, well, sister, you already there. But I just know that it could be much worse. And I don't want that. I have children now, and I have grandchildren that will have to grow up in this world, and I don't want them to have to grow up in a world to where people are judging them by the color of their skin, and they being, you know, refused certain privileges just because of the color of their skin. And even though all of my kids, of course, they're biracial, and my grandkids, of course, you know, my grandkid, he is, you know, and then my god grandkids, you know, they're little chocolate drops just like me. And so, you know, you don't want that. You don't want that type of discrimination, you know, there. Even though it's already there, I just feel like it can really explode and turn into something that we cannot come back from.
I agree. My conversation with my husband has been, how do we fix it? Mm-hmm. Maybe fix isn't the right word. How do we change the story? And so that's kind of been our conversation. I know that it all has to come up in this form, I guess. Mm-hmm. You know, it all needs to come up to the surface. When
there's any type of traumatic injury, the healing process is equally as traumatic.
I guess so.
I mean, it really is. It's like I was sharing this morning. I was on a radio show, and I was sharing with them about what happens, like when you suffer like a bad burn, mm-hmm. you know, like those, you know, 4th degree, you know, whatever, you know, and up burns, mm-hmm. that when it starts to heal, they come in and there's this process called the debridement, and they peel the skin back and make the flesh bleed. I mean, I remember working in my younger days. I worked at a rehab where I was able to witness that, and you see people just weeping and crying, you know, because it was not easy. That was a very difficult thing. You know, and they wanted to, you know, you want to say just leave it alone. And I remember myself, I was burned pretty badly when I was young, and I remember, it's so funny because I know it must have been really traumatic, because I can remember the bandages, I can remember it blistering, I can remember all that stuff, but I cannot remember. I remember her preparing to change the bandages, but I don't remember in between that, you know, like how it really felt. So I knew it must have been really traumatic, because like my brain just like cut those clips of that incident out. I remember being burnt, mm-hmm. and the food literally sticking to my chest and me having to knock it off as it's melting into my skin. And, you know, and I remember that. And so having said that, I stood there and watched people, you know, was a part of that process while they were being debrided. And it was very difficult. With this is we have gone through as a nation some very traumatic things, both black and white. Whether you were the one that was acting out the lynchings, or you were the one that had to see it, mm-hmm. and disapproved of it. You know, we all went through it, but it happened. But one of the things that I think that helps us is how I see me. And the reason why I say that is because, like, when you're in elementary school and they would show, like, I remember, I think I was in junior high school maybe, and they showed Roots, like, at school, and I just wanted to go through the floor, because, you know, it's like, I don't want to see Chicken George. I don't want to see, you know, the head right. I don't want to see all those things, while, you know, my white friends are there giggling and it's funny. But to me, it felt like it's happening to me, right? And so I was ashamed of that. But when I realized that it's a part of my history. And when we come to a place of where I am clear on who I am, you know, because too, not saying that, you know, the injustices need to happen, but I just know that in some of the most traumatic moments of my life, it gave life. It birthed me out at another place. And so I don't need all of the things to be erased. I just need how you treat me to be different, you know. While I'm seeing me different, because I'm not a slave anymore. I wasn't raised. I was born in the '60s, but I was a little kid, so I don't, a lot of that I didn't know. But because I know the history doesn't mean I want to relive the history.
My husband had a conversation with my daughter, and she said that's one of the reasons I want to get into law enforcement, because I want to be a difference, make a difference, kind of change the story. And so she said, because it shouldn't matter what color you are, because as a law enforcement person, the idea is to protect and serve.
Correct.
To protect and serve regardless of your color,
right.
Your, male, female, it doesn't matter. And so I told her that's a very good point. And the idea in I believe it's our Declaration of Independence, says that we are all created equal. And I think that's the cry.
Right. Is to be seen as equal. And I think that's the reason why, it hit me so hard, where I was saying, well, how do you see me? Yeah. Do you see me as equal? Yeah. And I've mentioned this quite a few times, since then, but there was a comment made, by some, members, they were part of a church, that we were ministering at, and, that they referenced the church as a black church. And I love the people dearly, but I'm gonna tell you what, it broke my heart when I knew that they saw it that way. Yeah. And I guess because in that moment, to me, it was saying that we weren't just a church, but we were a black church. And so how you see black people, or you see a black church, how do you see that? Do you see it beneath?
Right.
Do you see it, as not different, as good as, or, what do you see? And so it started drawing up all these other things. And I think, that happened maybe about 3 years ago. So it's not anything that's recent, but it never left me, because then I was wondering not only how you see me, but now how do all those other people that I didn't know, that may just see us like that, And man, that messed me up. And I think that's one of the things that we have become mindful of, and even as Christians, because we are Christians, we're not trying to hide the fact that we are Christians. We are Christians, So I don't believe I got to shove it down your throat, but that's who I am. But we have to take a different stance. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've been saying. I've been on a soapbox about that, forever, even with voting and, our just how we even respond according, to, just politics and everything, is that we have to escape that place of where we're voting just because of our color. Yeah. But that we have to vote from a spiritual and biblical, perspective. But because many people don't realize that God is still in that too, we're still responding a lot of times based on, color.
Yeah, absolutely.
And our past. Yeah. But we have to look at every candidate and say, is his stance, a biblical stance? Is this how God will want me to operate?
Right, right.
Because there's some things that as Christians we should not partake in. Yeah. We should not. We should not vote yes. We should not. And I don't want to answer for some of the things that we have voted yes. Yeah. Because, if we are being judged as a nation, I don't want to be a part of being voted,
incorrectly, or against the standard.
I don't want to talk to the Lord about those things. Yeah. I really don't. But I think that we're going to have to. There's some conversations going to have to be had. Yeah. Because we are all going to be held accountable for the condition in which our country is in.
I agree. I think too, in saying that, a key thing is to vote. I think a lot of African Americans, Black people, don't vote.
I think more numbers now than probably
more now. I
before.
agree. I believe. Yeah, I know we vote a lot presidential things.
But local elections.
votings. I think we think it doesn't matter that much.
Right.
But it matters. It matters.
Yeah, it does.
It's a
It
big
does.
deal.
It does.
That local government, that legislative, the ones, creating the laws and creating the statutes and the rules and the guidance and protocols.
Right. Right.
I think once we're more informed, we'll hopefully start, voting so that we can make a difference.
That with this, with the coronavirus and watching how each state is operating and how your governors operate over those states and how mayors of towns and so on, when you start seeing this interaction, and I think maybe it might have made it too clearer for some others that maybe did not vote, how important it is to have a voice, because you have set up these people, on multiple levels in government to make choices for you. And I have to know that this person that is making these choices, that I have expressed my opinion about situations, that they are truly representing, they're representing me. Yeah, and that doesn't happen a lot of times.
No, it doesn't. No, it's not the best interest for everyone. Yeah.
No.
I agree.
So, how do you feel about all the rioting?
Totally against the rioting. Is the rioting the noise that's needed?
Yeah.
Or is it not? Is it drawing away from the cry of
protesters?
The protesters. I heard George's brother speak, and he said, don't destroy the community.
Yeah.
We don't have to destroy the community to get our point across. Because the place where you're destroying are the stores that you're robbing and the places that you're looting. We live in these places.
Right.
After this is over, what do?
And that's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, that in some of those communities, there are people who don't have transportation to just get in their car and go to another side of town and buy groceries. And so you're not thinking about the aftermath, because it's not going to be there. They're not going to be. And some of those store owners and business owners, they are not going to stay. They
can't recover that fast.
They can't recover that fast. And so then what? I think that protest is necessary. I really do. I believe that it's how we are heard. I mean, when we go back into like even our relationship with the church, we're Protestant.
Yeah.
So that's, and that is, we protest, against what, one was saying, so that we would have the ability to be able to worship like this. And so, I think that we should. I think protest is good. I just think that all this extra stuff, because this is what what makes it so unnerving, I think, for me, is that all these other agendas are trying to be fulfilled in the middle of this thing. And so the main thing is getting washed away. Yeah. And so when it's all over, then what will we have?
Right. Will it have faded away because there's so much other noise? Will the protests still stand out 2 months from now? Will you see the protests, hear the cry still? Or will you be too busy trying to send funds to businesses and communities because they need to recover? Right. Or because you're trying to reestablish the police department, or,
my husband was telling me about, I can't remember where it was. I don't think it was in Virginia. I can't remember where it was that he told me. He said the police officers took a day off for one day.
Really?
And he said, now I'm probably getting the numbers off, but it was like 14, 18 bank robberies that day. I mean, like crime just unhinged. Wow. Like just in that day. And he said, well, maybe that's what we need to let happen. I said, no, sir. I said, that's like that movie, The Purging. Like, I don't think I want you, because I can take care of us. I'm like going, yeah, sir, but I don't even want nobody shooting through the house and trying to break in and climbing up my roof trying to just kill us off, you know?
Right.
You don't know how people really feel about you, so I don't want to have to contend with that. But he was saying how all these numbers, like once the police are out of the way, it was like, phew.
That's scarier.
And so there are places where they're really trying to pass, you know, these, I don't know if they're called statutes or what, but they're really trying to remove, like suggesting removing police departments. And I'm like going, what?
I did see that. I saw a statement where, I can't remember who it was, but they said, okay, maybe there's another way to handle a dispute at a grocery store.
Right.
Over $20.
Send a counselor.
Send a counselor. I just wonder for the one that's aggressive.
Right. That's not good. What?
Will the counselor work?
For the benefit of the aggressor.
Yeah.
While he getting beat up. While they're spilling out all their frustration all over him.
I hope, I don't want us to go to the other extreme. The idea is not...
Send that counselor. The shooting. Send the counselor to talk to him.
Yeah. I don't think we're saying we don't need police.
I think some people are, though. I mean, it's like, you know how you say, like, okay, what is that expression? Like, you throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's like, come on now. You can't just throw the baby out, too.
No, you can't.
Are there some things that need to be corrected? Most certainly. Yeah. But I think it starts with us having these conversations. I think my husband and I are having conversations that we have never had. I mean, we've always talked in depth about various things, but you know, like I find myself asking him, like, what can we do? And then, of course, you know, Pop, he's gonna give you the full scope of it, right? The side that you don't want to hear and the side that you do want to hear. And he's saying that, you know, a lot of times, one of the things that he did say, he said, a lot of times, guys that are out there, when you're dealing with really rough customers that are out there in the street, he said some of those are tougher than cops. He said, and so when you go into a scene, he said, so what are we gonna do? You want us to go out there and like, you get a person that calls and says, come, because this person is hurting me. And then you get there and you're gonna stop the person that's hurting them. And then the very one that called and said, don't hurt, they're hurting me. They're saying now, don't hurt them. And I told him, I said, I get that. I get that too. Absolutely. I get that too. When you realize what it might take to back them up, and you're the one that called the police, you may not want to see that. You know what I'm saying? You may not want to see what it might really take, because not everybody's going to back out, and most people aren't afraid of the police officers.
Not anymore.
You know, they're not.
No.
And so what will that look like? So I was saying, well, how do we do that? How do we get officers that will, you know, to where, you know, it's different? Is it in the hiring phase? Is it in the, you know, where is it? Where does that happen at? And I keep telling him, I say, you have to speak out. You have to, because like, I mean, he really has a great grasp on this thing. And but of course, you know, he can't because of just the work that he does. But I mean, you know, he was just saying that, you know, when you go to a scene and it's already like hyped up, you're actually coming in like to address the aggressor. And so you're on the defense. They're already on the offense. And so when you get there and they don't comply, then you got to notch it up again. And what does that look like? What will that take? And even though he was saying, like, you know, that was too far. You know, he actually shouldn't even been on that man's neck no more than about maybe a minute or two.
Enough to restrain. To
make him to comply. And everything else was over the top. But even in that, he was saying, but once you see it going off, the other officers should have stepped in and said, okay, enough. And he even shared with me, he said, there have been times like when you go into something and people are fighting for their lives on both sides. He said, adrenaline is pumping high. He said, and I've been in those places where it took a lot to apprehend this individual. And he said, and people are still in that go mode. He said, and I have had to say, no, this is enough, back up. No, he has cuffs on. No, you can't get with him. No, we got him. It's done. He said, but you're dealing with the human side of man. We think because they are police officers, yes, they are trained. Yes, they are. They are trained. But he said the one thing that you cannot control is you cannot control response in adrenaline responses in those moments. You just have to be conditioned enough to where you can try to make the right move. And what happens a lot of times now, I'm so glad like he does not work on the streets, because I remember when he did at the beginning of his journey. Now he's like not in that sector of work at all, but and even now I guess what he does is even more dangerous. But I remember passing by one day, I think I might have shared that with you, passing by him outside of a car where someone had let his prisoner go. He jumped out of the car on the street. He had arrested him. Then someone from the street opened the door while he was off trying to apprehend another guy, and they let him out. And so when they let him out, he's running in the woods, and they came and other officers, they were driving back him on the street, and he gets there, and the guy has his hands behind his back. Now he has cuffs on because remember he was in the car. So he has his hands behind his back and he starts counting down. Wow. He starts counting down like he had a gun. And I remember my husband making a statement when we got home that he said because of the way things were, and it's been getting bad for a while, but the way things were, he said, I hesitated. And he said, and if he had had a gun, he would have got off the shot first. Wow. And I didn't know if he had a gun or not. And I remember him being so frustrated about that because he was more afraid to pull the trigger than to, he wanted to give it all because he just did not want, what was going to come from that. Right. And then you have officers that are out on the street, both black and white, that are afraid for their jobs, that people are literally doing things to make them respond. And then when they respond, they're getting fired. Yeah. The situation that we saw on that tape where the older guy walked up, and then the police officer, they're saying like he pushed him or he tripped or whatever. And I don't believe that I believe that when he pushed him out of the way, that he did trip. I was watching the tape. Yeah. But, we have people that are literally setting things up like that, and that police officer, 2 of them lost their jobs immediately. But you know what happened after that? All those police officers that were out there with them, they resigned. Yeah. We're talking about whole families. And we're not talking about all bad cops. Not everybody was that guy that got on his neck, that got on their neck. But now you have good police officers, like my husband, who's asking the question, so am I being thrown into the same pile as the bad ones when I worked the streets, and served my communities well? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there is the challenge because you have officers like Pop that it's protect and serve regardless. But then there are, and I think that's a part of the cry or the protest, is there are situations or officers that have this preconceived idea. Mm-hmm. And so you really, from the beginning, I don't get the same treatment mm-hmm. As another person would. And so the patience like he had, instead of just pulling out his gun and shooting and not even taking that chance to see, I think because of that preconceived notion, right. That's not there with some officers. That's nothing that I don't think that's anything that you will find out in the interview process. How you won't find that out until
you're in the throes.
Throes of it.
And that's what I think people think can happen. But even like, I mean, and hopefully they can get around stuff like that. But let's just look at people with a narcissistic personality. They can pass those tests.
Absolutely.
And I know people that are that, both black and white.
Absolutely.
They can pass those tests and not even flinch.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, okay, so, what do we do?
So when it happens,
yeah,
then address it.
Right.
Don't let it happen.
Well, that's what he was saying about that guy. He said he had like, I forget how many. It was
like 17 complaints.
Yeah, something like 8. Yeah.
Not addressed.
Right. But were they addressed? And what were they? Because they get a lot of complaints too. They get a lot of complaints.
Right.
They get a lot of complaints. I saw that, when I worked for the sheriff's department. They get a lot of complaints. And not everything is warranted. As a matter of fact, they get a lot of complaints like all the time. So then what was that? How do you know that one that's in that bad apple that's in the batch? And then you have, the ones that are just getting those complaints. And that's why a lot of times when we're complaining on police officers, we really need to make sure that, our little Johnny wasn't really acting up before we got before we get over there. Me personally, I just have like some really mixed views. One, there are a lot of injustices. We can see that systemic racism. It is definitely there. We didn't blindly, like we didn't go through life and just blindly not seeing it. We saw it, but we made choices. And I'm not saying all, but I did. I'll say I made choices not to see it, but not to allow it to affect me. And I think the stance that I had when I was younger, I have it now, because I don't want to live like that. It takes too much to hate you.
Absolutely.
It does. It takes way too much for me to be angry with you every day of my life. And I've seen people who are literally bitter on both sides, who just don't, and their lives just reflect bitterness. And I mean, it doesn't matter what color it is. And I just refuse to live like that. I do not want to live like that. I made a statement like on a post I made. I'm not like an ostrich, my head buried in the sand. I am fully aware of what's going on. But I choose not to like cower down. I choose not to be angry. I choose not to take a bigoted, response. I choose. And because I made those choices, and I think a lot of it had to do with too the way that I was raised. I mean, I just saw everybody all the time. My mom's friends, these white ladies, coming in and out. And I didn't have like some really light-skinned mama, that blended in and you couldn't tell she was black. I mean, she's brown like me, And, but she has some really great friends that are still really great friends today, and she's 85. And so when we make those choices, we have to make choices to let go of those relationships too. And letting go of parts of my family, not an option. It's not going to happen. Right. Letting go of the ones that are, I'm not getting ready to let go of that. And so there's some conversations that I feel that need to be had. We got a generation, though, that's about your age, that's feeling something different. You want to talk about it?
Yeah, I think I go back to it's kind of twofold. One, some of our generation was raised by parents that experienced some of those racial challenges. And so then we were taught those point of views.
Go ahead.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, but I think the cool thing about our generation is we're not so narrow-minded, right? Mm-hmm. We don't always put, everybody in the same batch, right? But because in our current 21st century, you have millennials and then you have those that are our parents and grandparents, there's still a lot of those that experience those injustices.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so, the millennials are on one end saying, enough is enough.
I'm not tolerating that.
We're not
Right.
tolerating that. And you can see it on a large scale. I've seen businesses, Amazon and Adobe. I've seen so many large businesses and companies and corporations that are saying, enough is enough.
Right.
And so I think there is that enough is enough. But then I also think within that group of millennials, there are those that are angry. Maybe just as angry as if it happened to them, like, their grandparents. And maybe in some places it did.
Yeah.
I think it's necessary, the boldness that our millennial group has. It takes courage to decide to protest, and regardless of what the outcome may be, I think it takes courage. I think it takes boldness. I think that's good.
Has.
Yeah.
I think it always has. That the protests, it didn't start just with the millennials.
Absolutely.
I mean,
not.
like, we've been protesting up a storm like for forever.
Forever.
But I do believe that as time goes on, you're gonna have to be strong, and they are a strong bunch.
For a while, it was protesting for rights. Now we have the rights. Now it's equality.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see how it's happening, in levels. It's good.
I think though, when you're protesting like about rights, it was still equality. It was equality.
Yeah.
I have the right to go and have the same education that you are allowed. That I have the right to have a job and be paid the same. If I have the education to that I qualify for this job. But I think that what happens is when we start trying to compensate, and I'm not like we as like a country, so there's no blacks here in this company, and so then we just go and get somebody and they're not qualified, and then you have a white guy who is qualified, and then we don't give him that. So then now we got all this bitterness over here, right? And then we have, or else, I mean, it's just kind of like we just go in the ditch. It's like, okay, just give the one that truly is qualified the job. Black, white, green, orange. Just do that.
Yep.
Just do that. Just can we just do that? Because whenever you try to do these compensations, then you got something else that's all throw it off over here on the other side, and we're not trying to. Do you understand what I'm saying?
That's why on the other side of the ditch.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody, let's say all do it right. Let's just do it right. How about that one?
I think at that point, maybe when you see that is, okay, I'm just doing it because I have to.
Yeah.
Just to create the diversity or to meet the quota.
That's worse.
Yeah. That's not what we're saying.
No.
That's not the cry.
No.
If I'm qualified, then give it to me.
Right.
Black, white, Asian, Chinese, it doesn't matter, male or female.
Let's just do that.
If I'm not,
then I'm not.
Then I'm not. And it doesn't have anything to do with.
And I can't make it be about that. It was my, you ain't hire me because I'm black. No, I hire you because you don't know how to do it.
Right.
Right?
Right. Or I didn't hire you because every 3 months you're changing jobs. Right? You don't have it. Yeah. It's those things. But color is not an issue.
We don't see that.
No.
We don't see those parts.
No.
I know there's a lot more conversation that has to be had, and there needs to be a plan that's put in place, a realistic plan. I need policemen in my life. And I am not talking about my husband. I'm just saying I need to be able to pick up 911 and somebody come and help me out when I'm in a scrape.
We need law enforcement.
Yeah, we definitely need law enforcement. I feel like that. But we need each other too.
Yeah, we do.
We do. We, as black people, we need each other. And we need to learn how to love each other and love ourselves. Yeah. And we need to love our brothers of different colors, like truly. And we need to get past, some things. I'm not saying that you have to lay down, being black. My husband has never wanted that. I've never wanted that. There'll be times that, I just really was feeling like my blackness, and and I just, I make a quote or something, like I love my brown skin, and that's real. I I do. I like who I am, and I love, my culture, and I do. I embrace that. But there are a lot of things that's been different and wrong, and I don't want to have to look like you and act like you on either side to be accepted. If you're white or Hispanic, you shouldn't have to act like a black person. A black person should not have to act like whatever. You know what I'm saying? But then our brothers and sisters on this side, you got to cut us some slack too. You got to cut other brothers and sisters, slack. We cannot be dogging each other out and then expect, everybody else to see us respectfully. Like the whole thing of, calling us names and all that stuff, especially the women.
Right.
And not cool. Not cool.
Respect you first.
Yeah, right? Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I just, thank you for joining me today. And this is just the first of many. As a matter of fact, we'll be back in a week with the full panel, and Cheritha will be joining us. Again, we'll also have some of my relatives that are from in LA. And that'll be a part of our panel, different ages, different ethnic backgrounds, and we can just have those conversations. I think it has to start on a personal level first and then expand, because with people that and that you can have those. And I think starting here is a really good place. So, hey guys, you have been listening to Inspire. I hope that it inspired you really to challenge you more than inspire, but challenge you also to speak up and speak up in love, and really seek for an answer so that we can all do this thing together and have a better life for us and for our children and our children's children. This is Regina Johnson. I'm your host. Love you guys, and I'll be talking to you soon.